the sacrament. Actually, in George's heads up, I just went live here. Welcome to a Cirucci team brief here on December 8th, or December, getting my months mixed up, January 8th, 2020. It's going to probably just be me and George today. I sent an invite out to Johnny. We'll see if he joins in here in the next little while. And yeah, actually, we'll just continue with what we were discussing, George. It's a very interesting topic. And we're just going into how many American and Canadian cities, well, the cities all over the world, towns, communities, villages, hamlets, etc. All these communities are named after Roman Catholic saints. And we were just, if you want to go into this a bit too, George, some of the viewers might not be aware of it, but in St. Augustine, Florida is a perfect example of this. Named after the famed Catholic saint, Roman Saint Augustine. And you were mentioning how there was like a hidden massacre that took place in Florida around St. Augustine, Jacksonville, Florida in 1560. That's been, kind of whitewashed from history.
Well, yes, it took place. You're talking 1860. I guess there's some French Protestants called Huguenots that established a colony there in 1562, and they were wiped out a few years later, 1565. This is 7 years before the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. So there were, these French colonists came to the New World, hoping, believing they were safe. They crossed the Atlantic Ocean, but it never ends. So this,
in the eyes of the Inquisitors, George, just Pope Alexander VI papal bull in 1493 Inter Carrera actually claimed all of North America as papal territory. And, in 1560, the spirit of the Counter-Reformation it's still very strong today, but the battle, with the Reformation was more, it was more intense back then and in the open. Like nowadays the Protestant opposition has been, to the most part, culled and tamed. But so the papacy back in the 1560s, viewed like they were trying to stamp out Protestantism wherever they could. So having this sect of French Protestant Huguenots in Florida, which was claimed Catholic territory due to Pope Alexander VI bull, I think was the Catholics' legal justification for committing this massacre.
Yes, and after all, it is no sin to kill a heretic. As a matter of fact, that
was preached by none other than St. Thomas Aquinas, the doctor of the church.
So and of course, since then, the last 400 or 500 years, they've been way more subtle. They prefer to use proxies. One of the main proxies they've used for the last century or so, last 100 years, is Sunni Islam, particularly in places like Africa and the Middle East. Now, they're generally speaking, Boko Haram, which is in Western Africa, is funded by the CIA or the various subordinates, the British MI6 or whoever happens to be available.
Well, absolutely, and actually, if we can go into Sunni and Shia Islam also play into this current Iran situation. But all people got to do is look how close the Vatican is to both the Saudi Arabian and Iran governments. They're very, very close. Just recently, the Vatican got into full official legal diplomatic relations with Saudi Arabia in 2008. They've had, quote, unofficial relations since the inception of the country. But with Iran, for instance, like Iran has had official, and Iran is the Shiite brand of Islam. The current structure of the Iranian, quote, republic has the Ayatollah Khamenei as this, quote, supreme leader, just as the Pope is the supreme pontiff. And he's essentially like the Pope of Iran. There's supposedly a democracy, but the supreme leader has, absolute say on everything. And if you look how, Iran and the Vatican operate, it's a, very similar, a very similar theocratic principle. Same with Saudi Arabia. Is that the theocracy is the underlying relationship that between the two, and then often like the American intelligence agencies are like the kind of like the bread and butter, which kind of interconnects the whole web together to create the various proxies, such as ISIS, for instance. Like ISIS there's literally the Jesuit father of ISIS, Father Paulo Daglio, the Syrian. Literally, he's known as the father of ISIS, the Jesuit. And I see Johnny's actually in here. I'll get him in. But just to point on Iran, if people aren't aware, actually has more diplomats stationed to the Vatican than any other country in the world besides the Dominican Republic. So the Iran and the Vatican, are incredibly close. So ultimately, this is a proxy war being waged by the Vatican on both sides. And I can see maybe Jesuit Pope Francis will come in as like the savior, and he'll come in and mediate between both sides. But welcome to the stream, Johnny.
Yeah.
Hello, Johnny.
Hey, George. You say the same thing about some information that we shared back and forth in email this morning, whether it's what Eric found in regards to the Jesuit, Vatican, American influence, or not influence, control of the Philippines at the turn of the century. And my response in email was, it's the same thing. You have these oppressive colonial powers that come in and take over, conquer nations, whether it's Spain, Roman Catholic Spain, conquering and dominating the Philippines and then turning it over to Roman Catholic, secretly Roman Catholic controlled America. The exact same thing happened, as I said in my email, in what is known as Indochina, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, being conquered by Roman Catholic France and then being turned over to Roman Catholic Jesuit controlled America, and raping those countries, using those countries to traffic in narcotics and people. And it's the same old story. And you're taught usually by a secular professor who themselves are Jesuit trained that, boy, it's just circumstances, man, that, France came in and, boy, France lost control of Indochina. And that may very well be true, but you had no difference. It's like an American election. You had one Roman Catholic dominated country simply giving way to another Roman Catholic dominated country.
Oh,
So-
Johnny, can I just add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yes, with France, you're talking about French Indochina, i.e., what is now Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. So you had openly Catholic control France, turning over the reins to the secretly controlled Catholic country of America, and which was supposedly Protestant. And now I just wondering, Johnny, did you bring enough for everybody?
Water? No, I'll have to send it to you.
Oh, okay.
Well, the Jesuitical state. Well, I think late Jesuit Gavin Newsom was like trying to pass a bill to like limit water consumption in California, where Californians the bill literally says you can't take a hot shower or and do laundry in the same day, which is madness.
That is the ultimate. That is the ultimate goal, the ultimate agenda of the Roman Catholic left, is a total feudalistic and fascistic state. That's why Eric's been finding fascists in every single government's logo, icon, statue, architecture. It's their ultimate goal is to crush and enslave the common person. And not too long ago, I mean, they had it not too long ago in the Middle Ages. It was an overt feudalistic system, and they simply want to go back to that.
Well, by the way, Johnny, can I just mention something? I was talking to Eric about this before we went live. I just got a copy of Hang Nor's The Killing Fields, the book on which the 1984 film was based, starring Sam Waterston and John Malkovich. Now, I've just started it, but in the beginning, something that Noor mentioned is, now Noor was a survivor of the killing fields. The Khmer Rouge ruled Cambodia from 1975 to 1979, which was the same era as Idi Amin in Uganda. And I'm sure that that's just a pure coincidence. But anyhow, one of the things the Khmer Rouge did, well, they did several things. Since they came to power in the year 1975, that became year zero. Therefore, nothing existed prior to then. Now, I know that may sound absurd because you have all these buildings and books and newspapers and things like that and people. So what they did is they said, you know what, you're absolutely right. So what we'll have to do is destroy all the evidence, books, buildings, and people. And I had mentioned this to you in a conversation on the phone, is they wanted to eliminate all the accoutrements of Western civilizations. People who looked Western or acted Western or sounded that. I'm not talking about cowboy boots, but people who wore wristwatches, glasses, spoke at least one foreign language, especially English or French, because after all, French was the language of the oppressors. So, in other words, they wanted to get rid of the intelligentsia, the people who could run the businesses, who could run the government. So they basically wanted to create a nation of children, basically adult children. They wanted to not only bring Cambodia back into the Middle Ages, they wanted to take it back to the Dark Ages. So literacy was a huge liability. Being able to read and write, because you could teach, among other things, if you knew how to read and write, theoretically you could teach other people how to read and write, or, and God forbid, you might be able to pick up a Bible.
Yeah, well, that brings us back to Dagger John in New York City in the 1800s, who was was Dagger John a Jesuit? I don't remember.
Archbishop I don't think he was. He's probably like a secret Jesuit, because he actually financed St. John's College, which would become Jesuit Fordham University.
Yeah, so we'll at least call it.
I think you're going with here, though. Keep going. I think.
Yeah, Dagger John Hughes.
He got the Bibles out of the schools.
Yeah, was personally responsible for starting the trend of evicting the Bible from the classrooms. And most people don't even realize that's a great find by Eric. Eric found that. Dagger John Hughes is the Archbishop in New York who started that trend of taking the Bible out of the classroom. Most people don't know that. That's because true Christianity is a decentralized faith. Catholicism is, not to offend Catholics, but Catholicism is pseudo-Christianity that is highly centralized. It is a highly centralized religion and not a faith. Christianity is at its finest when friends and family get in small groups in their home and study the Bible and worship. Catholicism is at its most powerful and its worst in Rome. The massive hierarchy of the Pope and his cardinals and bishops and priests, and there is no power given to the adherent. You are not allowed to look up for yourself what your faith is all about. The experts in your hierarchy will tell you which religion is, and this is the disease that feeds into the Catholic mindset, that when a pedophile predator priest rapes your child, you go to the bishop. You don't go to the cops. You don't go to social services. You don't try to take matters into your own hand and beat the priest within an inch of his life. You go to the Catholic hierarchy, which is the vast majority of Catholic families do.
Well, I think to George, yeah, I think that's well said, and I think to George's point, this also ties into what George was saying about how the Jesuits and the Catholic hierarchy wants to create like adult children. That's who they want to socially engineer in society. The automaton, and if you study the Jesuit Paraguayan reductions, like the Paraguayan Indians, it's a sad story. But, the Jesuits got them hooked on drugs. In a lot of cases, worked them 16 to 18 hours a day. But the Jesuits, kind of perfected they kind of turned it into like a science, like an alchemical science, if you will, of molding the masses, the mass consciousness into automatons. And that's exactly what George was describing just now in Pol Pot's Cambodia. And Pol Pot was educated by Jesuits, who was doing this, disgusting, ethnic cleansing. And and I think that's just a side fact. That's why I think we see Noam quote Jesuit Chomsky, covering for Pol Pot in those massacres. Chomsky lived with Jesuits, and that people don't know. Noam Chomsky has honorary degrees from Jesuit Georgetown and Loyola University, Chicago.
Yeah, the far left communist Jew who lived with Jesuits in South America. What a surprise! The guy who got all of his education done at the non-religious University of Pennsylvania that our friend Veritas Aquitas has explained to us is secretly Jesuit controlled, which is why the alumni reads like it's Harvard. The number of rich and shameless who have gone to the nobody University of Pennsylvania. Who the heck's heard of the University of Pennsylvania?
Well, that's interesting. The University of Pennsylvania had the first Catholic Newman Center in America, and it was the University of Pennsylvania that were the scholars that put the popes and all of the Roman emperors in the Congress building. Like Justinian, I know you mentioned you've had this is in your works and you've written articles on this. Like Justinian was the emperor who made the Pope the bishops of bishops, and he's now in the Congress building. And his Justinian legal code is like the underlying principles of all of the quote law of the Western world.
You had those two pedophile frauds, doctors at the University of Pennsylvania that attacked. That promote this idea of false memory syndrome, so that the kids that take years to recover from the trauma of being raped as children, they later try to give testimony as adults, and you have two pedophiles who abuse their own daughter from the University of Pennsylvania claiming there's no such thing as these latent memories. It's false memory syndrome. I'll come up with their names in a second. George, you trying to jump in?
Well, Johnny, I'm always trying to jump in. Yes, Eric made my point. University of Pennsylvania was, as I said, the first U.S. school to establish a Newman Center. And just for clarification, the Newman Centers are named after the 19th century apostate Anglican prelate, John Henry Cardinal Newman, who is now a, quote, saint, end quote, in the Catholic Church. The first Newman Center ever was established in 1888 at Oxford, the birthplace of the Oxford movement, which had taken place in the 1833 to 1845. Okay.
I would say the Jesuits have a college over there now. It's secular Oxford. And I believe Oxford was actually created by a papal bull back in the 15th century.
Well, most of your prominent European universities were created by papal bulls. Oxford, Cambridge, University of Vienna, University of Munich. And by the way, that reminds me, how many prominent European Jews went to Catholic/Jesuitical schools? Something we talked about a couple weeks ago, Theodor Herzl, who is considered to be the father of Zionism, went to the University of Vienna. Eric and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. Not only did he, University of Vienna was established back in the 14th century as just a generic Catholic school. Then, during the time of the Reformation, the Jesuits took it over. Officially, in the 19th century, it became secularized. So they give Rome plausible deniability. So to be secularized means
and University of Vienna was thoroughly Jesuit controlled. I mean, it was like a hub of Roman Catholic doctrine. It was similar with the Sorbonne as a Catholic education. As a matter of fact,
Johnny, you're muted.
Well, your audio went out there, Johnny. Just a heads up. Well, let's see if that. Yeah, he'll get back in here. No, it's a good point though. Just another classic historical. I don't know if the University of Freiburg was created by a papal bull, but now it's not a Jesuit university. But historically, throughout this 15th, 16th, 17th, 19th centuries, University of Freiburg was a Jesuit stronghold. Mm-hmm. They actually, and I know they still have the University of Freiburg had a Jesuit seminary up until the 1930s, and that's where the Nazi philosopher Martin Heidegger was educated. And Martin Heidegger's philosophy of Dasein is all about creating like a Jesuit automaton, like a dumbed down adult child, like lost in the legal fiction. Welcome back, Johnny.
Yeah, I don't know how much of this you got. I was trying to say that we could do an entire show on how the Catholic Church is behind education in general. And there's a whole slew of personalities and alternative media threads on how the education system, whether it's Agenda 21 or any of these symptoms, how education, in quotes, is designed to turn children into automatons. Is designed to turn children into unthinking robots. It's very clear that education gives children nothing of what they need. Nothing of what they need. It does not encourage them to think critically. It does not encourage them to question authority.
I'd say it doesn't give you any survival skills either. It doesn't teach you no class in Canada and America has they don't teach you at all about how interest works, for instance. No financial literacy taught in the schools, and just basic stuff. How to work on cars. Handy stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trade work has been shunned.
Absolutely, in common sense, in the empire of Johnny, kids would learn cars, computers, personal finances, personal health, all the things that you would need to know, and personal finances. You could do entire courses on debt and buying, credit cards, cars, houses. None of that shit schools get into touch at all. No, they teach their kids what? Latin. And they don't even take it to heart, because that's the language that the doctors and the lawyers hide their trade in.
Well, I would say it's even I would say it's universal. Every quote secular university in the world has a Latin motto.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what we've heard, it's all kind of just engraved into our lingo, our language. We say, "What's your alta mater?" That's a Latin phrase.
And go ahead, George. Yeah, real quick hat tip to Tommy. Thanks, Tommy. Appreciate it. It's false. George, let me throw this out from I was talking about the false memory syndrome from these two monsters, Peter and Pamela Freyd, Freyd, two pieces of human debris who have been accused by their own daughter of being pedophiles. And surprise, surprise, they come up with this false memory syndrome outrage to give the pedophiles cover. What a surprise that they, and where did they come from? The University of Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, George, go ahead.
Can I just really quick, this just came to my mind. I know the University of Pennsylvania is also doing a lot of, quote, pre-crime research. And Donald Trump is actually, Jesuit-trained Donald Trump has said I think he said this after one of the latest mass shootings. He said that he wants to get into pre-crime research. He wants to stop, quote, mass shootings before they happen. But guys like us, just like they'll say, "Oh, Johnny, you don't be so hard on the Catholic bishops. Oh, he's quote mentally ill. He's a bad guy." But the point being, anyone that challenges authority, like someone could see my channel and say, "Oh, look, Eric's clearly mentally ill. He's criticizing the Vatican. Get him into a mental institution. Like this is the stuff that can happen once this pre-crime legislation gets on the books." And then there's
Minority Report. Tom Orsini Cruz, Minority Report. Pre-crime.
Well, I just saw this. The reference for this was in the documentary "Do Not Resist." But at the end of that movie, they showed to the University of Pennsylvania. They're talking to a quote criminologist there, and you see how the University of Pennsylvania is doing all sorts of research into, like they already have statistics like that before people are even born. They say, "Oh, this is the chance that he'll be a criminal," and they're already assigning numbers and probabilities to people before they're born.
And something they're doing that's analogous to this, you're talking about crime, is health. What is the probability you'll develop some sort of condition, heart disease, diabetes, some type of cancer? And because of this, you can do tests. As an adult or as a child, to where, oh yes, you have a such and such probability of developing colon cancer, such and such probability of developing breast cancer. And I know of some women who've actually decided to have mastectomies because of this. Oh, yes, I have a high probability.
Yeah, George, that is insane. George, that is insane. Who is the high profile? Some actress got like a double. Who?
Angela Jolie.
Did she have? Was it a double mastectomy because she was told there's a high probability that you'll get breast cancer? Are you kidding me?
Yes. So there's like without naming names, I actually had a family member who did this a couple of years ago because according to some tests she has an 80% chance of developing that condition.
Yeah, pause. Hey, wait, pause. Before we leave this, let's not jump over Angelina Jolie and
Yes.
Zip got her, Angelina Jolie. Good job, Zip. Who is Angelina Jolie? She's
the daughter.
Go ahead.
The daughter of Roman Catholic John Voight, who has portrayed Carol Wojtyla, a.k.a. John Paul II.
Yeah.
She's the wife/girlfriend of Brad Pitt, the apostate Freemasonic Baptist. And she's also the ex-wife of Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah, and so John Voight, hyper devout Roman Catholic, and a conservative Roman Catholic, surprisingly. So deep Catholic influence and very, very messed up individual. And Zip says UN stooge. Yeah, that's just one aspect of her life. So I didn't want to roll over her too quickly before we brought that out. And this is in Jewish controlled Hollywood, right? So go ahead, George, finish.
Okay. So speaking of which, so you take these tests that'll give you the likelihood that you'll be a criminal. You'll be, you have like a 67% chance of being a mass murderer. You have a 42% chance of being a bank robber, according to these imaginary tests. Oh, okay. So we should either kill you now or incarcerate you now. So since there's such a great likelihood that you'll be a menace to society.
Yeah, I would call. I'm gonna go back to this whole idea of cancer. I would call having some sort of having a disfiguring operation done, removing parts of your body simply on the chance that they will become cancerous. And particularly, I mean, mastectomy, having a double mastectomy. Wow. As a Christian, I would call that nothing short of satanic. It just, and then propping her up as an example as to why you would do that. Oh, she's done it, so you should do it too. Are you kidding me? So basically, you're so petrified of cancer, not catching the cancer, and then dying as a result, that you would rather disfigure yourself just on the chance of it.
Well, I'm saying they're going through with the mandatory vaccinations also. They wanted, part of the eugenics agenda is to inject people, and vaccines have a whole cocktail of, messy stuff in there. They even say in the vaccine inserts that, they haven't been tested for impairment of fertility. They haven't done toxicology tests and the like.
Yeah,
But out in California, Jesuit Moonbeam Jerry Brown actually passed laws recently when he was still governor that took away a personal, philosophical, and religious exemption for vaccines. So now it's mandatory in the state of California. So like they're going through with this, and this is like we're going into a very regimentation, Jesuitical style regimentation of base for society, kind of based on Nazi Germany. And then we're seeing that in 2020 rolling out too with the Real ID card, which is being pushed by Jesuit-trained John Kelly, the most vocally. John Kelly has a doctorate from Georgetown.
Imagine that. It's exactly what I said. The ultimate extent of a far-left Roman Catholic fascist feudalist state. And by the way, fascism is far left. It's in no way is fascism right wing. That's part of the Roman Catholic psyop, connecting the Roman Catholic Third Reich to something right wing. And in no way was Nazi Germany right wing. Socialism is in no way. It's the socialist. And that name of the Nazi Party was a socialist party. It is a leftist paradigm. Imagine that, where you become aware of the dangers of vaccines, and the power of the state requires, the power of the People's Republic of Mexipornia requires you. As soon as something is put underneath your skin, your body immediately absorbs it. There are so many defenses, natural defenses that your body has that are circumvented by going subcutaneous, by going under the skin. That's the big problem. The issue with vaccines is not whether or not they're effective. The issue is, who is the authority putting the concoction together? Are they trustworthy? And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. You cannot trust these pharmaceutical companies backed by the power of the government. Is it possible to come up with a vaccine that is actually beneficial? Sure. Not from the system that we have today. Even if you assume that some of these incidents are accidental, the idea of squalene being an adjuvant, being a compound that supposedly excites your immune system into working better, having all kinds of negative side effects, they're happy with that. Even if they came upon it by accident, they're happy with that. The fact that it's been connected with diseases that decrease your mental acuity. There's a whole host of diseases connected with that are considered causal to vaccination, especially when you load up children with vaccines they don't need. It's all an industry, and the industry is designed to keep you dumbed down, sick. It always sickens me to see, especially I love to see it on the NFL. They put all those clowns in pink this and pink that. What does that do? How does that help fight cancer? It doesn't. That's not what they want. They only want the appearance of fighting cancer. They absolutely do not. But look, chemotherapy causes cancer. That's all you need to know. You go to the doctor, you get chemotherapy for your cancer, and it causes a different kind of cancer. Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah, there was Jesuit-educated Gordon Zubrod, who is known as like the father of chemotherapy. He went to Georgetown Prep, Jesuit University of St. Louis, and then I think taught at Georgetown.
Bingo.
And I would say this is for Jesuit eugenics. A lot of people don't know Hitler's personal eugenicist was a Jesuit priest, Hermann Muckermann, S.J., who was also like the president of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, which was like a eugenicist think tank.
Bingo.
But but this year though, like they're really coming to cull the herd in 2020, especially with the real ID card. I'm pretty sure that I have to confirm this, but I think there may even be a vaccine requirement to get a real ID card. And even now, the real ID card, I think it's like a yellow star that you get on your license plate. Which is just really interesting because like the papacy way back in 1555, they signed a papal bull Cunis Nunis Absurdum, and they made all Jews in Europe put on like yellow badges to kind of signify that like they are like a second class serf.
Excuse me.
Interesting symbolism also on the real ID card. What were you saying, George?
Okay, Donnie was talking a moment ago about the athletes will wear pink ribbons or something like that to bring awareness to breast cancer or any some type of cancer. Well, that reminds me of something that happened. Was it 5-6 years ago with the so-called ice bucket challenge or the cold water challenge, where people would dump buckets of ice on themselves or some very across the U.S. and other places. And the impetus of that was Pete Freitas, who had some type of cancer. Freitas was a devout Roman Catholic, and he just died last year. And he was a baseball player at Boston College. So that trend got started, 5-6 years ago, or 7? Yeah, 2014. And so, what exactly did this do? People just simply got wet and maybe a little bit cold, and it did absolutely nothing.
Fantastic find, George. Fantastic find. So this ludicrous, stupid trend of having no substance connected whatsoever has a Roman Catholic basis. What a surprise.
So forgive me for being facetious, but I mentioned this a couple of years ago. Wherever there's smoke, there's always a Jesuit with a book of matches. It's just like this is something that Eric brought up a couple years ago with this calling Pepperdick or whatever his name is, the ex-quarterback. His lawyer was a Greg something other.
Oh, I think Mark Garagos went to Loyola Marymount, Jesuit.
Yes, in Los Angeles. So Peppernick. I know we've covered this before. Pepperdick or whatever his name is.
Kaepernick, not Pepperdick. Colin Kaepernick, not Pepperdick. Come on.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I hope that was not a Freudian slip.
Okay.
Yeah, real quick, I have to say that guy is a mess. And it really is disgusting and despicable, the fact that he was adopted by a white family.
Mm-hmm.
So he's doing everything he can to counter his own upbringing and betray the compassion of his family. He's like 1/4 black or something like that. Are you for real? I am shocked, Eric. I am shocked. As much as the MFL revels in divisiveness, especially racial divisiveness, how this guy is not mainlining, headlining in a team, how it appears that he's being avoided. Are you kidding me? He should be wanted by 10 different teams. I'm shocked. I'm sure he's going to end up somewhere prominent.
Yeah, but like, yeah, he can play. He can play ball. Like, I wonder if just I think with his lawyer being Mark Garagos, the Jesuit trained at Loyola Marymount lawyer, knowing how divisive he is, I think the Jesuits could keep him sidelined to keep the division ongoing. And with the NFL, it does give the perfect illusion for this to keep for this to keep going on, because all 32 owners are white, for instance. So there's plenty of ammo if Kaepernick does stay on the sideline for the the racial division, to continue.
Yeah, you can still approach it from that angle, and I'm sure that the race baiters do, and say, oh, it's actually racism that is keeping Kaepernick out of the MFL. It's just not as prominent as having that clown and his ludicrous afro in every weekend. You're just not going to see it as often. So anyway.
No, and I would just say here too, like, if you look into, like, there's plenty of high prominent blacks in this, like, in the U.S. government, for instance, that have been educated by Jesuits. And then there's many black Jesuit priests all over the world. Yeah, I think that I've seen this, especially like in the quote alternative media. There's this illusion that there's no black people in the in the New World Order power structure, if you will. But that's just ridiculous. There's numerous black cardinals, black men of power and corrupt businessmen, for instance. It's not a racial issue. It completely transcends race. That's just the point.
If anything, blacks have been highly targeted by the Catholic Church. For the black community, evangelical Christianity has been a special home that Rome has despised. It was Christianity that helped black slaves cope with their plight hundreds of years ago. So Rome covets black Catholics for use. George, I was talking to my wife about this just the other day. You've got no better example than a Jewish created show in Sanford and Son that starred two actors raised Roman Catholic, Red Fox and DeMond Wilson. How do you find, you have this idea that blacks are not Catholic. How did you find two black Catholic actors? How did the Jews who created that show find not one but two to highlight the show? It tells you everything you need to know about who really runs Hollywood and who kisses whose ring. And we talked about this earlier, how Red Fox joked about how he was pimping teenage girls at the same time that he was still, like an altar boy? He used that as a joke in his stand-up. I didn't think that was funny. Got you guys, George? You still there?
Oh, yeah, I got you. No, it's a good point. Again, and I'll just to maybe wrap it up with this. We can go into something else here. The point I was trying to make here is that with the whole, especially with the Kaepernick division and with the racist, Jesuitical, because people don't realize, like, the Black Panthers in San Francisco, for instance, and throughout the 60s and 70s were headquartered at a Catholic church called the Sacred Heart Cathedral in San Francisco, and they had the Jesuit Eugene Boyle, S.J., was the personally agitating in that case. you know, I'm the last person that, you know, you could call police apologist, but like with the Jesuits, they love to inflame people with irrationality and emotion. So like they were painting, depicting white police officers to these young Black Panthers at the Catholic Church in San Francisco as pigs. But what a lot of the Kaepernick rhetoric is that, for instance, is that the Black people cannot ascend into like high levels in the government, for instance. And just if you look at Maurice B. Foley, the current Chief Justice of the U.S. Tax Court, he is Black and he went to Jesuit Georgetown, for instance. You know, Michael Steele, a Black man, was recently the head of the Republican National Committee, and he went to Jesuit Georgetown and was a knight.
Michael Steele, Alan Keyes, who is the sheriff that Faux News keeps putting on all the time.
Oh, David Clark. Yeah, he went to Jesuit Marquette Prep. Yeah, and he's known as he's like the TV sheriff, and he's pushing the Blue Lives Matter propaganda.
Now listen, these are not bad people per se. I love to hear these guys, but the only reason they are household names is because of their Catholic Jesuit background influence. Clarence Thomas.
Well, absolutely, another great example. But Clarence Thomas, he Opus Dei, educated by
Opus Dei, Monsanto lawyer.
He's been on the Supreme Court, for years. So the point being that it shatters the illusion coming from the Kaepernick rhetoric psyop that Black people can't ascend, quote unquote, ascend in society into positions of prominence.
Yeah, all they got to do is be Catholic, and they shoot straight up.
Absolutely, and that's how it works for non-Blacks too. The majority of whites, like the majority of white prime ministers in Canada have been Catholic. We've had 10 open Roman Catholic prime ministers in Canada, more than any other religion.
You get another
being that it transcends religion. The majority of whites that get into power are Catholic. The majority of Blacks that get into power, Asians. Carrie Lam in Hong Kong's a Catholic.
Insane. Of all the citizens in Hong Kong and China, you could only find a Catholic female to be the CEO of Hong Kong. Are you kidding me? Does that not tell you we're right and everybody else out there are a bunch of frauds that don't cover this material? One more example that we all found together, Richard Pryor, born and raised by a Catholic deviant mother who herself, I think, was a pimp, right, George? Who sexually abused him and raised him Catholic, and eventually was responsible for turning him into a bisexual.
Well, Richard Pryor's mom and grandmother were both madams, and of course, Richard Pryor was initiated into Principal Freemasonry as a teenager, which is reminds me of something else, because I mentioned this to Johnny in a private conversation a week or so ago, in that since at least World War II, and probably long before that, in America, Canada, or in the West, generally speaking, in order to have any sort of position of prominence, you need to have an undergrad degree. Now, Richard Pryor did not go to college, so that's the connection here. But generally speaking, to be a congressman, a governor, prime minister, whatever the situation may be, you need to have at least a 4-year degree, a bachelor's degree. There have been a few exceptions here and there. Now, one of the reasons for this, and Johnny may disagree with me, is, well, there are several reasons for this. One, not to prove how smart you are, but two, is you need to be initiated into some sort of Greek society, a sorority or a fraternity, which is oftentimes a gateway to Freemasonry or some equivalents, Skull and Bones at Yale, Scroll and Key or whatever, St. Elmo's Club. And as part of, you need to have.
Well, I'm just saying that one of those would be the Society of the Innocents. What was that? The University of Nebraska that had like the trident in its logo.
Yes. Now, theoretically, you could do most of these jobs. You could be a governor, a prime minister, a U.S. senator, whatever, with just a high school diploma or even less. It's part of the elitism. The last U.S. president, for example, to have less than a 4-year degree was Harry Truman. and he left office back in the 1950s.
Well,
So
he made up for it. He got an honorary doctorate from the Jesuits at Fordham, Harry Truman, in 1946.
Yes. So my point is partially elitism, also is to initiate you into a secret society.
Yeah, let me be clear again, George, on this whole fraternity thing. Yes, it is important to know if a prominent person has been part of a fraternity and what that fraternity is, but you just can't step back and say bingo at that point. You have to know there's just so many damn fraternities to keep track of, George. As I told you on the phone, yes, connect a prominent individual to the fraternity, but then dig into the fraternity and find out if there's anything special about the fraternity. For instance, Roman Catholic Congressman Steve Scalise, who was part of that ludicrous baseball false flag, was part of a fraternity that required you to be a Freemason in order to join. Well, that was a great find by Doc. So he's Catholic and a Freemason. More than that. In fact, I list him as such. What a surprise that he was involved in that. And real quick, I'm going to throw out the Society of the Innocents. I came across that name, not the society, but the Church of the Innocents, anything of the Innocents. Centuries ago, the Marshal of France, Giles de Reyes, pronounce it any way you want to, monstrous, mass-murdering pedophile, also devout Roman Catholic, who paid for his own chapel and called it the Chapel of the Innocents. And probably wasn't doing it out of humor or irony. Doing it out of what I call the Opus Dei effect, is when you are a Roman Catholic, you can 6 days a week commit heinous, despicable, unbelievable crimes, and then just penance them away, pray them away, pay them away, indulgence them away on the seventh.
Well, I would just say it was one of the most despotic popes in history was Pope Innocent III, who's now in the Congress building. But his name is, kind of mockingly innocent. There's nothing innocent about him.
Yeah, there's been quite a few ridiculously inverse names of popes.
Well, actually, Pope Innocent.
Pius, Innocent.
Pius is another one. And I would just say too, I saw this in the comments above. Let me just shout out the commenter who brought up Phil P. Brought up the important fact. This just shows again. Just shows that there's a lot of gaslighting that worldwide that that somehow that all black people are absolved from political corruption and being involved in tyranny and being involved in the New World Order, and how that the Illuminati, the quote Illuminati, discriminates against blacks. It's just shit silly. But recently, the president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, more appropriately named the dictator of Zimbabwe, or you could say almost like the emperor down there, completely looted the country. He oversaw like the most intense hyperinflation in history. Robert Mugabe was a literal lay Jesuit. Literally spent 15 years with the Jesuits, growing up. Publicly commented how much he admired the Jesuits. For instance, so Mugabe shatters that illusion, and Haile Selassie has I don't know if you've seen this, but some sects view Haile Selassie as a god. He's actually the god of the Rastafarian people. The Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie, who was he was made the order of Pope Pius IX, for instance. He had a couple of papal titles. Haile Selassie was also a papal order of the Golden Spur. So he was nothing else. He was nothing more than just a Vatican political puppet. But he's been turned into a god among certain sects. But I even saw that when I went to Jamaica firsthand. The god they worship is called Haile Selassie. Just like the Emperor of Ethiopia. And I don't know. I just see this. I just seen it a lot. You know, there's the Hebrew like rights, like the Black Power movements have been completely co-opted by the Roman Catholic Church. And there's tons of there's just as I say, the police state doesn't discriminate. You know, it's an issue that transcends race completely. So I think it's important to put those lies and propaganda to rest.
Yeah, connected both to the Catholic Church and to Rome.
Okay, could I just mention something, Johnny? On New Year's Day, David Stern, who was the erstwhile commissioner of the National Basketball Association, died at the age of 77. He was the head of the NBA from 1984 to 2014. And yes, as you can glean, he was Jewish. However, a couple of salient points about Stern is when he went to Columbia, he was a member of SAM, Sigma Alpha Mu. And if you look at their iconography, it's very bizarre. On the top of it, you have an axe, which was in a sheath, and you have a couple of hands shaking, a couple of hands clapping is like appears to be a Masonic handshake, and you have a lantern. So what is, when I see lantern, I always think of, the joke that you rub it and a genie appears and I'll grant you 3 wishes. So he was almost certainly part of Hiram Abiff, or I'm sorry, Abiff Banai, or whatever the Jewish form of Freemasonry. And this is something concrete. This actually said this on Stern's webpage. He was a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. In addition to getting his undergrad degree from Columbia, he went to Rutgers Law School, I believe, or the other way around. So, a couple of questions. Why do you need all that education just to be in charge of basketball? Couldn't somebody with, say, a high school diploma do the same job just as well? Also, this is another point. Why do they call the head of a sports league a commissioner? The first thing that comes to mind is a cop, a chief of police. So does he have the power to arrest you or to execute you or something? And I'm being a little bit facetious, but you have the commissioner of baseball, the commissioner of the NFL, the commissioner of basketball. Well, do they have a commissioner for hockey, Eric?
They do. Yeah, the name is Gary Bettman.
Okay.
But the commissioner does have in terms of within the jurisdiction of the league, he has the power to, suspend any player, coach indefinitely.
Okay.
To do so. So he essentially yields tyrannical power within the structure of the league.
Yeah. So why do they have such an authoritarian title? Which is my question. Also, this is a different point altogether. How many people, we talked about the undergrad degree. A close second is you have a huge number of people on top of that who have law degrees, which requires usually a minimum 3 more years of education beyond your bachelor's. Stern, as I said, was a lawyer. Why? So, as I said, why did he need all that schooling for that position? Also, as I said, why was he okay? He was also a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, CFR. Now, under Stern's watch, he was in charge of the NBA from 1984 to 2014. Under his watch, basketball became basically an international game. Prior to him, it was almost and exclusively an American endeavor, even though the inventor of basketball was Canadian. I forgot his name, but so under
James, I believe he was a master mason as well. James Naismith.
Yes, but he went to. I guess he moved to the States and he developed the sports back in the 1890s in Massachusetts. But anyhow, so basketball is hugely popular in Europe, Japan, China. Yes, Red China. And as a matter of fact, they sell billions of dollars of merchandise in China, jerseys, hats, pennants, you name it. So why would this game be so popular there? And that's not really a rhetorical question.
Well, it's a great bread and circus distraction.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially with how big it's become, commercially. Like the NBA alone's TV deal, I think, is looking at like $7 or $8 billion.
Mm-hmm.
And
So, George, you obviously let me pull a George and yank you back to a previous topic. You obviously did not have your copy of Illuminati Unmasked properly committed to memory when I told you to connect the lantern to English mystic John Dee. Otherwise, you'd be able to go to page 577 and read John Dee, the eminent authority on Hermeticism and Kabbalism in England, laid the groundwork for the formation of the Rosicrucian order. He most certainly initiated young Francis Bacon into the order, as evidenced by the Jacob Katz engraving of 1655.
Oh, terribly sorry, Johnny.
Hang on. I didn't finish.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was interrupted. He most certainly initiated young Bacon into the order, as evidenced by the Jacob Katz engraving 1655 of Dee passing the lantern of the Rosicrucian light to Bacon over an open grave. And again, remember how this whole idea of lanterns and lights connects to Lucifer and the keeper of the light and Prometheus, who stole the light from the gods to give to man and just was consigned to eternal damnation and to have a great eagle eat his liver out every day and have it grow back at night. Poor Prometheus, poor Lucifer. Sympathy for the devil.
Which, by the way, was a Rolling Stones song back in the 1960s.
Right.
Which was their frontman, Mick Jagger, was a Roman Catholic. He grew up Anglican, but he converted when he married his Colombian or Venezuelan wife, whoever it was. So from switching over to the Anglican church over to the Catholic church wasn't a huge stretch for him. And we know how devout and pious Mick Jagger has always been since, the 1960s.
Yeah. Good for you. And by the way, Eric, you've got a copy of Converted Catholic Magazine, October 1946, that carefully details Haile Selassie spending a lot of time in Rome.
October, yeah, that'll. I believe you archived that too. I'll pull that up here in my. I'll link that in the chat for people to read. Yeah, I believe that's the issue that Haile Selassie is exposed, being a Vatican political.
Yeah, good find. All right, so I got a bunch of stuff. Let me dig up in my folder. Hang on as I.
Well, I know. I mentioned to George before we went live. If I don't know if you've got some stuff on your computer there related to this, Johnny, but I wanted to go into the Iran conflict a bit, just with kind of how the Vatican is playing both sides. Well, because it also appears that like the war with Iran, has begun because. It's a pretty reckless decision by Trump. That'd be like if Iran assassinated Joseph Dunford, and if that happened, there would, already be, airstrikes taking place and bombs being.
Yeah, I still want to know, and I didn't find out. I don't have a lot of information on it right now. How it was that. What is this guy's name again?
Soleimani?
Qasem Soleimani. How you have an anti-ISIS Iranian general being murdered in Baghdad by a drone strike? Are you pardon my language, are you fucking kidding me? Do any of these nations have any sovereignty, number one? Aren't there just wall-to-wall soldiers still everywhere in Iraq? You had to rely on a drone strike to murder this guy?
Well, Johnny, I'm pretty sure the American embassy in Iraq, it's even commented on the Wikipedia page. It's similar. It's like 110 acres, just like the Vatican. They commented how it's similar size actually to the Vatican City State. But if people aren't aware, the American embassy is ginormous.
Yeah, let me tell you, the Skynet infrastructure that is in place that tracks individuals and has assets hovering above to murder you at a moment's notice, really, really disturbing.
Yeah, Barack Obama gave the green light for that to occur on U.S. soil too. You know, I don't want to put fear. I don't want to fearmonger anyone, but
it can.
You know,
It
really is like a Skynet system in place, as you just said.
Yeah, I've got evidence of a drone strike occurring. Let me get the details. What was that fertilizer plant that spontaneously blew up in Texas?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got the video of that, the phone video of that.
Okay. I order your prescription. Oh, thank you.
George is taking a delivery right now. I've got cell phone video of that fertilizer plant in Texas with the unmistakable sounds of a drone strike.
Okay, so
I'll have to look into that more. But you know, they openly admit now that the drones are flying over the U.S. Like hundreds of them, especially over the border area.
And what they won't openly admit is how many of them are armed, and how they could be easily used to kill people quickly.
Okay, so I just had a question regarding this killing of this general Soleimani, Kazim Soleimani, however you say his name. Is he actually dead? Who knows? Two, if he is dead, why was he killed, or why was he officially killed? I mean, did he get online? Did he grow conscious? Who knows? And to be honest with you, prior to a week ago, I had never heard of him. However, I decided to dig into his background. He was born in 1957, so he would have turned 63 in March. And I'm just looking at him, and this is something Eric did a video a year or two ago on all these medals that people get, non-Catholics get. They're an order of such and such. Well, Soleimani last year was made a member of the Order of Zulfikar. I had never heard of this before, which is exclusively an Iranian order. And you just look at it, it looks like a Star of David. And I don't know much about the history or the background of it. So, but if you look at it, just on Wikipedia, it says type chivalric and dynastic order. Though it has the Royal House of Pahlavi. I've never heard of that. So how many of these countries, how many of these ostensibly non-Catholic countries have these orders, have these knighthoods? And what is the significance of them?
Yeah, my dear friend Plain Joe noted that I won't not just so many, but it's part of the Iranian uniform. The Roman Catholic iconography on these Muslim countries' uniforms, whether it's the Roman laurel or eagles or fasci or it's just everywhere. It's ubiquitous. And by the way, Salvation Pictures wants to know what your YouTube channel is, George.
I'm sorry, I don't have one.
Yes. Well, he has one. He's just locked out of his own channel.
So I'll have to try to do that again. So yes, but as I said before, I never had to be worried about being booed by my fans because I outnumber them.
No, you have a great many fans. The problem for them is that if you love George, you're only going to get them through Eric or myself.
Okay, for the time. Okay, so yes, that's one of my resolutions for 2020 is to come up with a YouTube channel. So I'll definitely give them some reasons to boo.
Yeah, it's Lubla just mentioned that the Kissinger comment. Didn't we find who was it? Who one of us found that there are some Catholic connections to Kissinger's family?
Well, according to Mae Brussel,
that was it.
Okay, I realize, for what it's worth, I have some qualms with her, but I won't address those right now. Henry Kissinger was not actually Jewish. He was actually Roman Catholic, and there are a number of German Catholics who left Germany in the 1920s and 30s who simply feigned to be Jewish, or they've been partially Jewish. Another example of that, you're talking about Kissinger, but you had the Klemperer family, the conductor Otto, and his son Werner, who is probably best known as Colonel Klink on the TV show Hogan's Heroes. Now, I realized I was completely inane and vacuous. Colonel Klink, Werner Klemperer, he was Jewish on his dad's side, but Catholic on his mom's side.
Okay, and he's jumping from Kissinger to Klemperer.
Well, anyhow, as it turns out, during World War II, I forgot the name of the alphabet. Kissinger and Klemperer, the future Colonel Klink, served in the same army units. And their handler was Fritz Kramer. Kramer was actually tried at Nuremberg, and there were some questions as to what his sentence was. He basically got off and ended up moving to America through paperclip.
Yeah, good work.
Okay,
that's solid background on Kissinger. I believe one of his handlers also in the early days was Jesuit-trained Vernon Walters, also
yes.
a Knight of Malta. And Kissinger in the 70s, I was going to say famously, but I don't think that's the case because most people don't or aren't aware of it. But Kissinger actually became a professor at the Jesuit powerhouse in Washington, Georgetown University.
Well, wasn't he an adjunct instructor?
Yes, adjunct. He was there from. His stint started in 1977, shortly after. A few years after the coup in Chile. It's kind of like a promotion for him.
And of course, Kissinger was actually at the Al Smith Dinner in 2016. I'm not sure how many times he's been there, because if you look at the video of the Al Smith Dinner in 2016, you can see him. As a matter of fact, Al Smith IV acknowledges him, and Al Smith IV makes a joke. He's talking about Michael Bloomberg, Chuck Schumer, and Henry Kissinger, and Al Smith IV said something along the lines as, "It's hard, I was glad to see all these prominent Catholics and everybody, busted up in laughter, because everybody knows they're not Catholics; they're Jews."
Yeah, I think he named Kissinger and Howard Rubenstein. He's like, "We'd like to thank the good Catholics on stage, like Henry Kissinger," and then everyone's like, "Ha ha 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 ha." They kind of did put that out there in plain sight.
Yeah, that reminds me of Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres, who is Catholic educated and born in Poland, and yet he was selected to become the Prime Minister of Israel.
Actually, I just thought of, after Perez, the current dictator of Cameroon kind of had the same trajectory. He was educated by Jesuits in France, and then became the Emperor of Cameroon, managing it for the Jesuits. I'm sure we could do a whole show on that. I know we've done lots of detailed research in the past. That's the blueprint. The Jesuits get someone as an outsider who doesn't have any loyalty or sympathy or connection to the land that they're about to become in charge.
Yeah, that's where the current chief executive in France, Jupiter Macron, had an affair in high school with one of his teachers and went on to marry her. Little perversion and deviancy. What kind of high school was it? A Jesuit high school.
Well, I mentioned this before. That sounded somewhat like Newt Gingrich. His first wife was, I believe, his ex-teacher. He was a teenager, and I guess he was an adult when he married her. She was like 25 or something, and he married her right after high school. But then after a few years, he traded her up for a younger, prettier model, and she got sick or something.
Yeah, more than once. And I think it was his second wife that was suffering from cancer when that piece of shit divorced her.
Yes. And now he's found the true faith. He's now a good Roman Catholic.
Yes, he is a good Roman Catholic, and his wife sings in the choir in Rome and is the United States ambassadoress to the Vatican, selected by evangelical Protestants, pedophile Donald John Trump.
Yes. So, anyhow, so Johnny, did you have some things on your file you wanted to go through?
Yeah, sure. How about your old email on Gertrude Stein? Did I get that right?
Yes. Sorry, I guess you weren't too happy with the email.
Well, no, I had to play Sherlock Holmes with the fucking thing. Pardon my language. So you send Gertrude, okay. you send the Vatipedia entry to Gertrude Stein and a Vatipedia entry to a cemetery. I'm like, what? What the heck am I supposed to do that? Okay, so let me put on my sleuthing goggles and go find out that the homosexual Jewish female who ran to Roman Catholic France to have her relationship with another homosexual Jewish female, Alice Toklas, right? Is that right?
Yes, Alice Babette Toklas.
To later be blown up by all of Western civilization on what a brilliant writer she was, is buried in a cemetery named after the Jesuit confessor of the Sun King, whom I just wrote about in Romans of Mass Destruction. I forgot to mention that in an email.
Mm-hmm.
Pierre Francois Francis de la Chase.
He was a tyrant. Like, I know, I first saw this from Theodore Greisinger's book, The History of the Jesuits, written back in 1877. But apparently, the people of France, were cheering in the streets when this Jesuit La Chasse died, because that's how much of a tyrant he was. I think that says a lot.
What a surprise! So the Jesuit confessor who whispered into the ear of the Sun King. Sun King was just a vicious Roman Catholic, monstrous Roman Catholic, destroyed, tortured, persecuted the Huguenots and the Protestants of France.
Actually, was it Louis? It was Louis XIV, if I'm not mistaken, that he commissioned the funding of the Versailles Castle, which embodies like the Catholic elite, elitist cronyism, like aristocratic caviar class.
Go to Vatican. Go to the Vatican search engine, Google. Go to their image section and just type in Versailles, and imagine one man living in that outrageous estate. Criminal. That kind of largesse. Despicable. Only a Catholic sovereign could live like that. Only a Catholic sovereign could spend the people's money like that. He's the same monster that got the criminals in his army and forced the Protestant French to house the monsters so that the monsters would rape and abuse their wives and children. That's what a great guy the Sun King was in his persecution of the Huguenots.
Yeah, also Louis XIV. Probably it was probably his Jesuit confessor La Chasse, who and his other Jesuit confessors and advisors who.
Yes.
This, but Louis XIV retracted the Edict of Nantes, or revoked it, And that was the treaty that said that us Catholics won't prosecute you Protestants.
That was from
that.
Yeah, that was from Charles of Navarre, who gave the Protestants some breathing room, and that was immediately revoked. Hey, look, Catherine de' Medici had a Jesuit confessor that helped her and encouraged her to commit the massacre, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre.
It's the same pattern that comes up over and over and over again with Jesuits. Pius XII had his Jesuit, Augustin Bey, in his ear during the entire duration of the Second World War. And I don't know if we saw this. Maybe we can go into this a bit later in the show. Just the Augustin Bey. This came up with this. This ties into the pedocracy. This came out a year after your book, Eaters of Children. I don't know if I don't think we've mentioned this on our shows here. But the story was titled. This was from the local Spokane News, where the Jesuit Gonzaga University is. Because at Gonzaga, there's something called the Augustin Bey House, named after the Jesuit priest Augustin Bey, who was Pius XII's confessor. But there's this headline is called "Jesuits Sent Abusive Priest to Retire on Gonzaga's Campus." And this was a big scandal here. Came out from the local secular paper, centered around this Jesuit Reverend James Poole. Maybe with time, maybe go into that a little bit, but. It's the same pattern that happens over and over and over again. It's the Jesuits who are in the confession, the Jesuits who are in the ears and are the confessors to all the kings of the world. Nancy Pelosi's Jesuit confessor, in America, as Father Stephen Privet, S.J. I think he's the president now was the president of the Jesuits University of San Francisco. This is the U.S. Speaker of the House. A position of power that has a Jesuit in her ear. Just like it was in the Middle Ages with Louis XIV.
When we get that phenomenal information from ex-Jesuit Alberto Rivera, it was Alberto Rivera who said he received that information in a personal briefing by Augustine Bey. And so what do they do with the monsters who rape children? They send them to the Augustine Bey retirement pleasure resort, rather than persecute and execute monsters for who and what they are.
I'm saying that I think that's probably what would happen in Louis XIV's France if sex scandals came up with a select group of Jesuits in France at the time. They would just be exact same thing. They would just move them to some certain Jesuit college.
Yeah, absolutely. They were very good at having the show of going after sexual deviants, but Louis's own brother was an open homosexual. And so the Catholic Church played both sides, as they do everywhere, both promoting and persecuting at the same time, never with any balance. Never with any balance, either one or the other, either horribly persecuting or openly promoting sexual deviancy.
Well, I'll link this to this. I saw this. An individual posted this in my Jesuit World Order blog. But the story here with the lawsuit from the Associated Press came out December 30th, 2019. Headline is "Lawsuit: Famed Jesuit Abused Boy 1,000 Times Around the World." This continues with the Jesuit Donald McGuire. You mentioned him in the Eaters of Children book. He was the Jesuit pedophile in Chicago. But this is just disgusting stuff. But interesting in this story, it came out that the quote unquote Saint Mother Teresa was actually supporting this pedophile Jesuit Donald McGuire throughout the years. And just quoting from the article here, it was during this time that McGuire developed ties with Mother Teresa, becoming her spiritual advisor, while vetting nuns seek to join the religious order she founded, the Missionaries of Charity. I'll link this story here. It's disgusting stuff. This guy, the victim's last name was Goldberg. He claims he was raped over 1,000 times by this Jesuit. the same Jesuit has come up in numerous cases. Like I have a Chicago Tribune article called "Chicago Jesuits Hid Sex Crimes" from 2013. That was a Jeff Anderson case, I think, when he was the lawyer. So I think McGuire ended up going to jail in 2019 or no 2009. 2009 or 2007, one of those 2 years. Years and years after these crimes were committed. But this is a new lawsuit. But the stories like this, especially centered around the Jesuits, seem to be coming out every month.
Yeah, I can't think.
The agency is incredible, especially that Mother Teresa was supporting this pedophile. And I'll put the link in the description. So I did hear it's the last from the Associated Press. People can check out the relationship that Mother Teresa had to this pedophile. And the thing about how disgusting that is too, that Mother Teresa literally has like thousands of schools named after her in North America.
She is the epitome of compassion. She is the epitome of compassion. Meanwhile, she was a cold-hearted monster who enabled the predation of children, trafficked children. Her orphanage trafficked in children. The abuse that takes place in Catholic orphanages is the worst monstrosity I can think of. These children are desperate for love, compassion, and understanding, and all they get is raped and abused. That's what the Catholic Church gives them. They come in need for love, compassion, and understanding. They are destroyed. They are lonely. Does it get any more descriptive than Catholic clergy who rape and abuse handicapped children in their Catholic orphanage? Blind, deaf. So you are absolutely lost. You're completely lost in the world. And you also can't see or hear. And the response by the clergy, by the piece of shit, scum of the earth Catholic clergy, is to sneak in the middle of the night and rape you. Are you fucking kidding me? It is an absolute monstrous, evil, satanic, malignant insurgency. That's Roman Catholicism, period.
Johnny, could I chime in on that point?
Yeah, go ahead.
I came across this name the other day, Mark P. Langan or Lagone, who was born in 1965. Don't remember the context in which I was looking up his name, but I just came across him. He got his undergrad degree from Georgetown University School of Foreign Services. And according to his Wikipedia page, he's the professed go-to dude guy for every subject on human rights, quote, global, and quote, health, human trafficking, global institutions, and governance. Lagone is the chief policy officer at Friends and Global Fight Against AIDS, Cancer, Malaria, and is a distinguished scholar also at the School of Georgetown School of Foreign Policy. As a matter of fact, in his picture on his Wikipedia page, he's speaking at a 2007 conference on human trafficking. He got his undergrad degree from Harvard, and he got his PhD from Georgetown. So I just want to clarify something. So, as I said, Langan is supposed to be the expert on human trafficking.
Well, what was the first name of this Lagan, George?
Mark
Lagan. Oh yeah, so this proves that the Vatican is actively deploying propaganda disinformation agents to quote unquote show us what's really going on with human trafficking all over the world. They're getting in front of it to steer it. And this Lagan is proof of this that you just mentioned. And another one is Conchita Sarnov. She went to Catholic, I think it was a Sacred Heart College, a Catholic college that she went to. But Conchita Sarnov wrote the book Trafficking, in 2016 or 2017, which is supposedly the big tell-all expose on the Jeffrey Epstein pedophile ring. There's absolutely no mention whatsoever about all the numerous Catholic, high-profile Catholic elite papal knights that were connected to Epstein, or how Epstein's charity supported the Catholic charities, or how Epstein's what was Epstein, the Epstein Six Foundation, I guess that was the name of it. No mention of how Epstein's foundation is supporting Catholic charities in the Virgin Islands, for instance.
Yeah, Sarnoff's a great example.
Yeah, so
a great example. Catholic educated, but from a Jewish family, and Daddy Sarnoff was promoted to general in the United States Army because of his connection and skill in propaganda and psychological operations.
I'd say Conchita is. I'd say she's picked up where Granddaddy left off.
Yeah,
she openly admits in her book Trafficking that she's close with Ghislaine Maxwell, who was seen with Jeffrey Epstein and Pope John Paul II. One of the photos in Epstein's house. So it shows that the Vatican is literally deploying disinformation agents to get ahead of the human trafficking, situation, to make it appear, and so that the Pope can come in as like the savior also and say, "Oh, look how much I'm doing to fight this and stop this crisis."
That is exactly the playbook. That is the biggest play in the playbook, is to commit crimes and then leak knowledge of the crimes with your own agents steering the leaks to minimize. No better example than the scandal in Omaha that we all call the Franklin cover-up, because just such a Roman Catholic agent, John DeCamp, almost monk John DeCamp, has done exactly that, has repackaged the trafficking of children out of the Catholic orphanage of Boys Town and focused it on the middleman pimp, Lawrence King, and the Franklin Federal Credit Union that had absolutely nothing to do.
I would say as if the kids were coming from.
Yeah, as if the kids were coming from the credit union. There were no boys coming out of the Franklin Federal Credit Union. They were coming out of the orphanage of Boys Town. Why is it not the Boys Town cover-up? Because the Catholic Church was responsible for the outrage and used its own insurgents who were members of Army intelligence again, and part of Operation Phoenix in Vietnam, like John DeCamp was, and his boss, the the Saigon station chief, William Colby, who later became the CIA director, get in front of the scandal and steer it to a safe distance.
And also all the Catholic propagandists are regurgitating the old tired facts. That's the quote facts, like you can call alternative facts. That's just a few bad apples in the Catholic Church. So they're really stressing
6%. 6%, right,
6%.
George? What's Bill O'Reilly? Bill O'Reilly says there are more pedophiles in the common population than there are in the Catholic Church, right? He would know, being the misogynist pig and monster that he is.
Well, yes, he throws out that figure. Well, they like to. Okay, we could do a whole show just on statistics, numbers. Like if they want to maximize a problem, or if they want to scare something or scare people, they'll inflate the numbers, like the number of people who died from guns. Or if they want to minimize a problem, they'll lowball the figure. And I don't mean to keep bringing this up. If you're talking about next month marks the 75th anniversary of the firebombing of Dresden, and the low number people will give in terms of how many died was 25,000 or thereabouts. The high number will be at least hundreds of thousands, perhaps 1 million. And, also you could talk about the Inquisition. Old Catholic apologists will say only a few thousand people died in the Inquisition. Is less than 10,000. As a matter of fact, more people are probably killed in car wrecks each year
Yeah,
than actually
more,
died.
more people die from ingrown toenails than the Inquisition killed, George. Clearly.
Yes, and of course, this they'll say the lowball figure is like 3,000 or 5,000 over the course of centuries, and they say that was bad. But even though they're right, some of the inquisitors, went a little bit over the top. They're a little bit overzealous. But actually, it wasn't really the Catholic Church. It was the secular governments in France and in Spain and places like that. So, and of course, they'll always say, so since you're only talking a few thousand, it was not millions or tens of millions, because Catholic apologists will say, well, anti-Catholic bigots will say that places like France and Spain and Italy were just dripping with blood from all those poor Protestant heretics who were killed.
Yeah,
And
George,
people
the rewrite is it's amazing. All you have to do is have a cursory understanding of true history, and you're going like, what? I remember when my Roman Catholic puppet evangelical digital theological mentor, Dr. Chuck Missler, put out the theory that Christopher Colonna, aka Christopher Columbus, was actually Jewish and left Spain because he was Jewish. Now, what Chuck Missler didn't say is that why would a Jew leave Spain? Because on pain of death to convert to Roman Catholicism. And many more than Jews were being persecuted in Spain. There were many more Christians being brutally persecuted.
The Portuguese Inquisition is infamous for that too.
Absolutely. What were the two monster sovereigns? Was it Francis, Isabella, and what was the other monster?
Well, Philip II in Spain was a big Catholic.
Another one, yeah.
Ferdinand VII.
Yeah,
also,
Ferdinand.
He restored the Inquisition to Catholic Spain back in the 1800s. Although the Inquisition, is still covertly here today. It's just under a new title, which people aren't aware. The propagation of the doctrine of the faith, is still the same body. If you
it's the same Inquisition.
The name changed in the early 1900s. And I would say
still there? Okay. Did we get
countries like Louis the 14th, like these countries throughout the medieval Europe had concordant treaties with the Vatican, which are their special legal documents that they sign with secular states, and in all these treaties, it states that Roman Catholicism is the official state religion, and that's why the quote secular powers were enacting the Inquisition, because in the legal code it said that Catholicism is the true faith.
I'm so glad you returned. I'm so glad you returned to the Sun King Louis the 14th, because I don't think I properly closed out George's email, and the idea that this brilliant homosexual Jewish poetess Gertrude Stein is buried in a cemetery named after the Jesuit confessor of Louis the 14th, Pierre Francois de la Chaise. It's an excellent find, George. Mm-hmm. Who is behind promoting this woman? And like I just sent to you.
Well, I'm just wondering, is that the Jesuits at Fordham give something out called the Stein Award? Is that named after this Stein?
Eric, pull up the Vatipedia entry on her with her profile picture with the American. Are you kidding me? The manipulation. What really is upsetting is this is what Rome does. Takes a puppet who happens to be homosexual, who happens to be Jewish, and pushes her up front. Are you kidding me? a not particularly good-looking woman with a butch haircut like a man in front of an American flag. The manipulation is just despicable. And that's the profile picture that objective, user-edited Wikipedia has chosen for us. And by the way, George, how did you find out where she's buried? Because I don't think that's in that Wikipedia entry. Surprise, surprise.
Well, you know what? I actually didn't find anything on her per se. I had to go to her partner, Cactus or whatever it was,
Toklas.
or Tokus. And then it had her listings. Also, you'd be surprised how many famous people are buried in this graveyard. Whatever. Jim Morrison of the Doors is also interred there.
If he's dead. If he's actually dead, he's at. Wait a minute, he's at that same Pierre Francois Delachaux cemetery. Are you kidding me?
I'm not. That's according to our dear friend, our other Eric John Phelps, because he died in Paris.
Well, it's a good find. We have no idea. Look, that whole, Dave McGowan did a great job of showing how the 60s rock and roll drug culture is completely fabricated by the Catholic Intelligence Agency. But of course, McGowan stopped well short of giving you the big picture and how Rome and the Vatican was above the CIA. So really, really important. Dave gave you the trees, but never the entire forest, and still may have paid the price for it as a result. Yeah, good for you, Joe. The Dragonades, however you want to pronounce it, the forced billeting of soldiers in Huguenot households to rape and abuse the family there.
That show people how the Catholic Church is a military war organization. Nothing to do with faith and like reading.
Absolutely.
Reading the Bible or studying the soul or whatever.
All about power. All about power. And nothing with just the trappings of Christianity. All these frauds that are supposedly Protestant Christians that are on board with this ecumenical movement to be part of the fasces and bow to the authority of Rome, you will be held to account. You will be held to account. Every one of these so-called Christian leaders that bows to Rome because they promote this idea that Rome is Christian and on the same side. No entity has tortured and murdered more Christians than the city-state of Rome. No entity. Let's see, Nicholas. Good job, Nicholas. Louisiana named. Yes, Louisiana, St. Louis. Actually, I think, Louisiana may be named after the Sun King. St. Louis is named after King Louis the First, I think. Also French Roman Catholic, and I think the only sovereign to be canonized.
Well, that's a great with Louisiana. Actually, even in the Appleton's Encyclopedia entry on Jesuit priest John Carroll, Appleton's Encyclopedia of American Biography, he mentioned how the Jesuit priest John Carroll wanted to he wanted Louisiana to become like a secondary Maryland, to create like a Maryland, so that Louisiana would be a Catholic fortress in America, which it is, to this very day. That ties into because I know me and George mentioned this at the start of our show. I wanted to go into how this article, how 56 American cities are named after Catholic saints, and I think they list 54, not 56. Pardon me. And the first one we listed St. Augustine in Florida, which was near the location where that massacre took place against French Huguenot Protestants a few years before the St. Bartholomew Day massacre. But this should, actually, it cites that St. Louis is named after St. Louis the Ninth and Louis the 15th of France. That's on number 4. But these are some big American cities that are listed by, or that are named after full-on Catholic saints. I believe I'm screen shared here. So I'm just going to go down the list. You got St. Augustine, Florida, Ave Maria, Florida. Ave Maria, Florida was founded in 2005 by the Knight of Malta, Tom Monahan, founder of Domino's Pizza. San Antonio, Texas. I think it's St. Antonio, or named on the feast of St. Anthony of Padua. 4, St. Louis, Missouri. 5, St. Paul, Minnesota, named in honor after Paul the Apostle by Catholic Father Lucien Galtier. You got St. Anne, Illinois. This Charles Cirucci is credited as founding this town here, St. Anne, Illinois. Cirucci would later leave the Catholic Church and criticize it. But you got St. Leon, Indiana, founded in 1952. Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and there's also Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. And I am aware that Sault Ste. Marie was founded by French Jesuit missionaries, called St. Mary's Rapids. St. Clair, Michigan, named after Clare of Assisi. You got this one's named after the founder of the Jesuits, St. Ignace, Michigan. Founded in 1671 by French explorer and priest Father Jacques Marquette, a Jesuit, named after St. Ignatius of Loyola. Marquette University, the Jesuit school in Milwaukee, is named after this Jesuit here, Jacques Marquette. You see here that St. Joseph's, Missouri, St. Joseph's, Michigan, named after renamed St. Joseph. St. Peter's, Missouri, named after Spanish Jesuit mission previously established in the town. St. Thomas, Missouri, named after Thomas the Apostle. St. Charles, Missouri, named after St. Charles Borromeo. I'll scroll down the rest of the list, but if you guys want to comment on those, but it's pretty profound how many American cities are full on named after Catholic saints.
Let me just say that it's no coincidence that the two most devastating and prominent assassinations in American history of Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy were both hatched in New Orleans, named after Old Orleans in France. New Orleans in Roman Catholic Louisiana.
Well, New Orleans is like in a fortress. To this day, I did a video down in my feed that 7 consecutive mayors of New Orleans have been Roman Catholic. Like 5 of them educated by Jesuits.
And that says it all.
And here's another town named after St. Ignatius Loyola, St. Ignatius, Montana, MT, founded originally by Father De Smet and Father Hoken in 1854. This is like a whole hidden history. George mentioned I know he's mentioned that there's 3 or 4 cities in America called Rome. There's Rome, New York, which isn't too far from where I'm at right now. And actually, the big city near me is St. Catherine's, is named after a Catholic saint, St. Catherine. And where I grew up in Brockville is located on the St. Lawrence River, named after the Roman St. Lawrence. It's pretty profound how everything, if you just look at where the names come from, it all goes back to the Roman Catholic Church. Here's a St. Louis, Oregon. St. Louis, Oregon was founded by a Jesuit missionary, Father Aloysius Vercusi, for instance. And here's a big one here. St. Los Angeles is named after the Virgin Mary, the town of Our Lady of the Angels. So we're going to say, actually, George, I know you mentioned, you said there's 3 Sacramentos, George?
At least. The most prominent one is in California, the capital, but there is one in Pennsylvania, one in Colorado, and Sacramento means the sacrament. And there's a huge number of Catholic community. I mean, most of your major towns in California have Catholics: San Francisco, San Jose, the aforementioned Los Angeles, San Diego, and some smaller ones: Santa Rosa, St. Rose. And as a matter of fact, Eric was talking about some towns that were actually founded by Jesuits, such as St. Ignatius of Montana. Well, the adjacent town to where I live, Rutland Park, which is where Sonoma State University um, is located, was founded by a lay Jesuit in the early 1960s, Morris Roberts. Roberts lived from 1925 to 2018. Roberts went to St. Vincent de Paul High School in Petaluma, California, and got his law degree from the University of Santa Clara. And as I said, he was one of the founders of the town of Rutland Park. And Rome has owned this neck of the woods for basically its inception. We've had the county where I live, Sonoma, has had at least three Jesuitically trained district attorneys, including the current one, Jill Ravitch. She went to University of San Francisco. The current mayor of Santa Rosa, Steve Speldheim, went to St. Mary's College. The chief of police of Santa Rosa, Rainer Navarro, got his master's degrees from the University of San Diego. So they basically man almost every position of authority in this county.
That's profound control, George. And I think that every county in California, which is pretty frightening.
So people don't pay attention to a relatively small neck of the woods. Sonoma County has maybe less than 200,000, but there's a huge amount of capital they're spending on a relatively small population.
You know, Sonoma County is where the Bohemian Grove is it not? And
Yes.
that's held by the Roman Catholic, or the keepers of the grove are the Knights of Saint Hubertus.
Yes.
The Bohemian Grove, I would say, is a key strategic asset for the Roman Catholic Church in the United States. But that's where they get a lot of their dirt for political blackmail on all the candidates, on the rituals that go on there.
Yeah, Phil says British Prime Minister, Roman Catholic British Prime Minister Boris Johnson named one of his children Apollo. Are you kidding me? Does he know Macron there in France, who says he's going to govern like Jupiter? Hilarious.
Yeah, I know Breitbart ran an article on that too. The Macron wants to govern France like a Roman god. Jupiter being the Roman Zeus.
This is who they are. This is who they are. And who was, I think it's William asked what happened to the Templars. They went underground. They went underground in Switzerland. They went underground in Scotland. And one other location somebody mentioned, I couldn't remember.
Spain,
yeah. Thanks, George. Yeah, good for you, George. So they went underground in Scotland, and they gave birth to Scottish Rite Freemasonry. They went underground in Spain, which gave birth to the Jesuits, and Loyola was trained in Templar Gnosticism. And they went underground in Switzerland and became the banking puppet masters, which is why nobody ever touches Switzerland in a war. And by the way, usury banking was created by the Templars.
I would say also like the Templars. I think that you went underground, if you will, or they ingratiated themselves with the Roman black nobility families, like the Habsburgs, the Medicis, the Borgias, Aldobrandini's.
And the Medici were also a banking family. And they put this psyop through that it was Jews who created banking. The very word bank comes from the Italian banco, which is the counter that the Medici did their business over.
That's a great point. There's a lot of disinformation that the Jews created modern banking, which is pretty silly. There's fractional reserve lending going back to the Roman Republic, even in the Roman Empire.
And of course, they reinforce this psyop because in a couple of ways. You have Goldman Sachs until what 10, 12 years ago, you had Lehman Brothers. And generally speaking, almost all the chairmen or chair people of the Federal Reserves have been Jews.
Well, although recently, like many of them, like they're the distinct papal court Jews. Like Janet Yellen was the chair 2 chairs ago. She was, or the last chair. Her husband, Daniel Aklarov, was a professor at Jesuit Georgetown University. And the current guy in there, Jerome Powell, has got his doctorate from the Jesuits at Georgetown. And I would say, like the Federal Reserve, it's in the Fed symbolism too. They use the Roman laurel wreath, on their logo. I have the quote here from this guy was Jesuit trained Robert F. Siren, or Richard F. Siren. He went to Boston College. He was one of the advisors to Paul Volcker. And Paul Volcker is another. He was a Jew that was in charge of the Fed. He died recently. But Paul Volcker, for instance, had honorary degrees from Jesuit Georgetown University and Fairfield University. But Richard Siren, I'm going to link the quote here so people can check it out. But he literally compares the Federal Reserve banking system to the church. He says that's why he's so comfortable with it. He says that just like it's got a pope, the chairman, it's got a college of cardinals, like the open market committee and the board of directors. He says, but if you're naughty in this system, if you're naughty in the Catholic Church, you come to the parishioner, or you come to the parish for the confession. If you're naughty in this system, you come to the discount window for a loan. So that's all in the quote I just linked there. It's from William Greider's book, The Secrets of the Temple. But I think it's very, very revealing that the Federal Reserve is ran like a church. And even like all of their architecture of their buildings, like their big Fed building in Washington looks like a Roman temple, just like the Supreme Court building.
All by design. All by design. I never did hear from that guy Shea. Eric, I don't know what you have on him, but for some reason, a Washington state legislator, Matthew Shea, has been the target of at least the UK Guardian, and I'm sure other papal propaganda media outlets, and being called a domestic terrorist. Matthew Shea is known as some sort of far-right evangelical Christian, yet he's double-dipped at Jesuit institutions, both of them named after Gonzaga.
Yeah, I believe he even took he got his military training at Gonzaga too.
Yeah, so not a good sign. I have no idea what's going on there. He reached out to me on LinkedIn. I didn't reach out to him. He reached out to me. So I recently messaged him, and surprise, surprise. Is it possible that he just doesn't pay attention to his social media? Yeah, it's possible, but it's just not a good sign. Is it possible that he's just an outsider who's being punished for some reason? Yeah, but again, you're not going to see him. He wouldn't be a name to us unless he were double dipped at Jesuit institutions.
Well, I think I'd classify Matt Shea as part of the new Jesuitical right movement.
Hey, what did we just say earlier in the show? And I got to get going, but what did we just say earlier in the show? You pound on the citizens, you hammer them, you enslave them. And as they start to rise up, you put your puppets in front of them to steer them in the wrong direction. It's been done again and again and again. So I guess Matthew Shea is going to be one of our Pied Pipers to steer us into some sort of suicidal uprising with the armored cars of your local law enforcement brought back from Iraq and handed to them. No thanks.
Okay, Johnny. I know you had to be going. I had to be going probably no later than 2 p.m. Eastern. So if I could just throw out a couple things. I was just looking at, I'm sure you're probably familiar with the actor Adam Sandler, comedian, Saturday Night Live, and he's done a number of films. Okay. Of course, he's Jewish, and that's a good sign. And, okay, he has a modicum of talent 25 years ago. Okay. His wife is Jackie. His wife's name is Jackie. She's a convert from Catholicism. She grew up Italian Roman Catholic. Her maiden name is Titioni, So she converted to the Jewish faith to marry Adam. And I realized that doesn't really pertain to what we were talking about, but we were talking a moment ago about paper court puppet Jews. Um, Ben Stiller's mom, Anne O'Mara or something, she was Irish Roman Catholic. She became Jewish when she married her husband, Ben, or Jerry Stiller.
Yeah, I'll accept those all as significant and indicative of the game that they play. They love to see that. They love to promote that.
And of course, I'm dating myself somewhat. Okay, I was never a fan of the old TV show.
Hey, wait, we got another one. Ashton Kutcher, who supposedly he was born and raised Roman Catholic and loves to wear his Oxford Freemason ball cap when he goes to the NBA when he's sitting in the front row at the NBA Finals. And he supposedly converted from Catholicism to Judaism for his wife, Mila Kunis, who spent a semester at Loyola Marymount but doesn't remember it.
Yeah, that's
just
a good find there. And actually, it just tied in with Shade just before you jump back in here, George. I just found one of the biggest white nationalist agitators of the big Charlottesville riots that took place a couple years ago, Matthew Heimbach, Heimbach. Matthew Heimbach was born and raised Catholic, which makes perfect sense. They control, just like how we mentioned earlier, they co-opted the Black Power movements. They completely control the White Power movements as well on the other side of the dialectic.
Both sides. George, I got to get going, bud. Been 2 hours.
Okay, could I mention one other thing? Okay, could I just mention one other thing before you step out? Valerie Bertinelli was a popular actress, TV actress back in the 1970s and 80s, largely because of the TV show One Day at a Time, which aired from 1975 to 84, and she herself was born in 1960. So as you might guess from her name, yes, she's Italian Roman Catholic, although she doesn't practice anymore. She had that TV show which was on for almost a decade, and she later go on to marry Eddie Van Halen of the rock group Van Halen. So she has two major connections, television, and she's done other things, and I think she does Weight Watchers or something like that. And she was married to one of the most iconic guitarists of the 1980s. And of course, when you think of Van Halen, most people, or at least I think of David Lee Roth. They're obnoxious, over the top lead singer who's Jewish. And One Day at a Time was one of the numerous TV shows that Norman Lear did in the 1970s. And I was talking about another show from that era, Soap. So whenever you have a movie, a TV show, it doesn't matter the 1970s or the 1950s, they have an agenda. There's something they want to accomplish. They're trying to condition you to accept something or to reject something else. I realize.
Yeah, like FBI's Most Wanted, a CBS special, like to convince you that the FBI is just diligently going after these heinous criminals. Meanwhile, they are the criminals.
Isn't that done by what was it, Roman Catholic Walsh, John Walsh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who's old friends with Donald Trump. He's known Donald Trump for over 40 years. As a matter of fact, Walsh met Trump in the 1970s when he got into building luxury hotels in Florida and the Caribbean.
No, there's actually I'm pretty sure it's FBI's Most Wanted is a new CBS special, not America's Most Wanted. There's a CBS special that having to do with the crime fighters at the FBI. Look, the bottom line is whenever there's some bullshit psyop that you start to question whether or not the FBI is actually doing their job Hollywood comes to the rescue.
Well, think about
Navy
this.
SEALs, FBI, whatever the bullshit that needs to be SWAT, right, George? SWAT, Navy SEALs, FBI, whatever the bullshit that needs to be reinforced that these traitors are actually doing their job, Hollywood comes to the rescue.
Well, this FBI show with the new, I'm pretty sure it's Roman Catholic John Walsh. It's probably his new show.
On that show as well?
I think it's because I know he has a new show out because I saw it on.
Good for you. He does them both then. Okay, good.
It could be because I remember I was on the TV when I was on vacation in the U.S. Like he came up on like a new infomercial for a new show. I'm pretty sure it was the FBI's Most Wanted. But think about this, like the convenient cover up for them, or to paint the FBI in a good picture after the FBI confiscated the videotape footage from the prison cell, right outside of Jeffrey Epstein's prison cell. And the prosecution supposedly made a request that these videotapes would not be deleted, but the FBI, somehow lost track of the video.
Yeah, they're great for that. Are you kidding me? How is the top law enforcement agency losing critical evidence?
This is
getting away with it.
And this is at the same time, like I literally in my local article, like while I was at my pizza job here, just reading the paper. Yesterday, like the FBI wants to create like a nationwide biometric ID database for DNA samples. So they want to get all this up to date, detailed information about everyone's personal lives. Yet at the same time, they're losing, critical evidence.
Don't hold your breath, waiting for some sort of punitive action to be taken against whoever it was that lost the evidence. You'll never see that in a report. It was tracked down that this office and these individuals were responsible. They were fired from their jobs and they are pending their own investigation. They've been arrested, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Never anything remotely like that again and again and again. Whether it's that or it's the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, where FBI agents were involved in helping make sure the bombs got created with their own assets. Imad Salem. The FBI caused the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Willful blindness, Andrew McCarthy said. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, I'd say they also murdered the in Waco. They murdered the Branch Davidians.
Absolutely.
You don't necessarily have to agree with the theology that the Branch.
No, in fact, the
fact that they were murdered by the FBI.
The more murky they are, the easier it was for them to be targeted. The more murky they were, the more questionable they were, the easier it was for them to be targeted, especially with their association with the Adventist Church.
Well, of course, the thing is, something I mentioned years ago, this is long before I heard of you, Johnny, or anybody like you, is the thing about Waco in the 1990s always struck me as odd because I thought this was supposed to be, at the time, 20th century America, where we have freedom of religion according to the First Amendment. It is not the job of the government to punish heretics or alleged heretics.
By fire, George. By fire. Burning them alive. Punish the heretics by burning them alive.
Okay, yes. And I realize even back
I assume because you can see the FBI and ATF agents had sniper rifles and stuff. I imagine some people were
the same. And this is from your friend Eric John Phelps. Not from your friend, but I think verified by your friend Eric John Phelps. Is the FBI sniper that killed what's that woman's name up on Ruby Ridge?
Weaver?
Yeah, we killed Randy Weaver's wife, and she was holding their infant daughter in her arms. Put a bullet in her brain with her infant daughter in her arms. That same FBI sniper was at Waco taking shots at the women and children there. A Japanese American trained at West Point. I forget his name. I'll come up with it in a second.
This is the same pattern, especially with with the treasonous behavior of the FBI. Like think about the videotape from the Mandalay Bay Hotel in Vegas during the shooting when Stephen Paddock supposedly all by himself on the 32nd floor, from a room in the 32nd floor, caused all this carnage. They haven't released any videotapes on how Paddock brought all these weapons into his house. After 9/11, the FBI went around to all the local hotels and businesses in the area of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and literally confiscated videotapes of from everyone. They're so cibold in the open with their treasonous behavior.
Yeah, Lon Horiuchi.
Oh, sorry, what were you saying, John?
Lon, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Lon Horiuchi, Lon Horiuchi is the name of the criminal who murdered Randy Weaver's wife as she was standing in their door, waited for that. I guess that was the perfect shot. What a piece of shit. What a monster. A woman holding an infant in her arms. Shot in the head. And I'm sure all that blood and body flew all over that little baby. What a monster. Should have been executed for that. Executed. Instead, they sent him over to Waco to do some more. Anyway, all right. Look, I'm really going, guys. Great job. Great show. Glad I could jump in. Let's do it again soon.
Vicky was her name was Vicky.
Thank you, George. Yes, Vicky Weaver. Well done. And I think, I don't know what, I think Eric had something else on Horiuchi. There might be some Jesuit breadcrumbs behind Horiuchi as well. I don't know. Anyway, I got to get going, guys. Thanks.
Okay.
Take care.
Nice seeing you. I'll keep in touch. Yeah, do you want to wrap up with anything, George, or sum up before we take off here? I'll probably get sign off in a few minutes. I got to get ready for work.
Okay. Well, I do actually need to be going because I have a number of things to take care of. Wow. I was just looking at this Horiuchi, this Lon Tomoshima Horiuchi, who was born in 1954. I don't find anything Catholic in his background, but I'll have to look more into him. So, was there anything
with the Waco massacre? The guy in charge of the ATF at the time was a Papal Knight of St. Gregory, Ronald Noble, and the head of the FBI was a member of Opus Dei, Louis Freeh. So I'm saying from top down of the mission, it was controlled by Rome, which is the important fact. It'd be I'm sure Jesuit breadcrumbs will pop up with this guy, but the key information is that who was in the leadership positions at the time, and those were owned by Rome.
Well, the as Johnny was saying, this what was his name? Horiuchi was actually tried for manslaughter, but the judge in the case, the U.S. District Judge in the case, was Edward Lodge. That's an interesting name. Turns out that Lodge attended Notre Dame, so Lodge made the decision that Horiuchi could not be tried for manslaughter because he was just simply executing his.
Oh, wow! Well, there you go. Through this Catholic judge, that shows that cements them, being behind his acts. View him as a protected asset. Also, that's what that shows.
Okay. So, anyhow,
ordinary Americans, wouldn't get that type of treatment. After they just assassinated someone in broad daylight to get pardoned, that doesn't happen.
And it turns out that Horiuchi, I'm just looking this up as we talk. Horiuchi's lawyer was a fellow by the name of Stephen Yangman. And I'll send you. Oh, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. In 1997, Boundary County, Idaho, the place where this took place, prosecutor Dennis Woodbury, with the help of Special Prosecutor Stephen Yagman charged Cirucci in the States with involuntary manslaughter over his killing of Vicky Weber. Now, so the lead prosecutor was Stephen Yagman. And he taught classes. Yagman received his BA in American history with minors in philosophy and political science. He later earned an MA from New York University, where his mentor, Professor Sidney Hook, and a master's dissertation on the Fifth Amendment of Self-Incrimination Clause. He attended Fordham University Law, receiving a JD in 1974.
Jesuit Fordham? A doctorate from Jesuit Fordham?
A law degree from Fordham. So the prosecutor of Cirucci. Wow. So in other words, Rome was in charge of the whole legal proceedings.
Yeah, both sides controlled. Wow. Well, he just for the viewers and just for refresher for me for the what you named the judge and the prosecutor again.
So
what was the judge was last name was Lodge. What was the first name? And he went to Notre Dame. Edward Lodge,
which is an ironic name. Boy, you don't think you're playing? You don't think they're playing a joke on us, do you?
Lodge. Well, I wonder just there's been prominent U.S. politicians with Lodge in the name before. Henry Cabot Lodge. I wonder if there's some sort of relationship or descendant from the Lodge family.
But I was just thinking, it's just like something that Johnny has brought up before. Whenever you're looking at your players, you have to look at their full names, not just their nicknames. If they go by Frank, is his given name actually Francis, or what is his middle name? Is it Xavier?
Or like Joseph Ignatius Breen.
Yes.
The key was Ignatius as the middle name. You can probably tell, who he served as the head of the Hollywood Production Code Administration.
Mm-hmm. And then you had the Massachusetts politician David Ignatius Walsh.
And he was responsible for moving the naval base from San Diego to Hawaii.
Yes, you have an excellent memory. Eric, I'll be honest with you. It's usually a good day if I can remember my own name. To keep track of this stuff, I had to look at my tablets. So yes, that's an excellent memory. So basically, Walsh, along with another senator, Vincent, was partially responsible for the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Oh, very fitting. And probably coordinating to make sure that the Papal Knight Ed Dohany's assets at the Elk Island Oil Reserve in Hawaii didn't get hit on Pearl Harbor, which they didn't. And that was interesting. And I know you mentioned this too, but I was rereading Charles Hyham's book, Trading with the Enemy, recently, and David Walsh is mentioned in that book. He was he was part of a Nazi spy scandal in the 1940s. Openly allied himself with Nazis, like this Nazi Olev Tetsuo, who is known as the Nazis' roving ambassador. And in the book Undercover by John Roy Carlson, he says that David I. Walsh got Ole Tetsuo off of treason charges, and then Tetsuo told John Roy Carlson that it was due to his personal friendship with David I. Walsh.
Mm-hmm. Can I just mention?
Apparently, he did eventually. He had immunity. Like the Nazi investigation into him, went nowhere. And apparently, he was also a cross-dresser, I believe. Which.
Yes. So, and you weren't talking about Rudy Giuliani.
Giuliani is very similar though, and I believe Giuliani is also a papal knight. So ultimately, he's serving the same people. I think Giuliani's a knight of Saint Lazarus, I believe. I've seen that.
Yes, and of course, he's dear personal friends with Donald Trump. Well, I was going to mention one last thing before I go. Well, there's probably 100 things I could mention. Speaking of cross-dressing, I know you did a video a year or two ago, on Tom Hanks, Thomas Jeffrey Hanks, who was born July the 9th, 1956. And you brought up the fact that his son, Colin, went to Loyola Marymount, Los Angeles. Well, his dad grew up Roman Catholic and Mormon, but he's now a Greek Orthodox because of his wife, Rita Wilson. Well, Tom Hanks, his dad, this is going back roughly 40 years ago, he was on a TV show called Bosom Buddies, which was on in the early 1980s. And in that show, which he co-starred with Peter Scolari, there are a couple of straight men who are living in New York City, and their apartment was being bulldozed or something like that. So they had to move into a place that they could afford, and they moved into this house where it was women only. So to live there, they dressed like women. Now, granted, this was just a TV show. They were not; their characters were straight. They're not cross-dressers. But they, as I said, they simply feigned to be girls in order to live in this house. So that was one of Tom Hanks' first roles on television. This is long before he became, or a while before he became a movie star.
Oh, very interesting.
Now, I'm sure you probably never heard.
Yeah, I was just saying. Well, that is an agenda in Hollywood, like the trans agenda, LGBT agenda. You know,
Yes.
and pretty much every Hollywood, quote, superstar, end quote, has to bow down to that agenda in some way. Like recently, they had Kevin Hart come out as like a female pope. He was dressed like one of like this I forget the gym, like this child gymnast in the U.S. that's somehow a celebrity. But they literally made Kevin Hart come out like just dressed as like a pope in a female dress. And like he came out like they did this like simulated like that Kevin Hart was elected as the new pope, and there was cardinals out there, and he was throwing like flowers over the balcony. It's almost like it's like a humiliation ritual, I guess, in a sense.
Well,
I don't know.
yes,
It's to me like if I was in Tom Hanks' position, then for no amount of money, would I prostitute myself like that?
Well, okay,
dress like a woman or do anything like that, especially in like a Hollywood movie that gets brought to people.
Okay, it's just like with Skull and Bones or any sort of secret society. I won't be too specific, but I understand you have to do some fairly disgusting things, very perverse things, in order to be initiated into Skull and Bones or any other.
According to German Skolnick, you got to get into a coffin naked with another man, and then shut with the other quote initiate or quote brother, and then shut the lid. Which is pretty gross.
Well, and then. Well, yes, that's bad enough, but they do other things, and I won't elaborate. But it's just like, or Bohemian Grove. Men get naked and they do all sorts of really, from what I've heard, they do all sorts of really repulsive things. So they had that one to blackmail you and to initiate you and say, well, if you'll do this one wicked thing, perhaps you'll do others. Perhaps whatever it is that you'll do. So years down the road, when you're a U.S. senator, you'll vote the way we want you to. Or when you're the chief of police of such and such town, you'll destroy evidence for us. Or whatever it is we need you to do down the road. It could be years or decades later. But don't worry. Whatever it is you do.
Kamala Harris, epitomizes that. When she was head of San Francisco DA, she buried like the year's investigation into the Archbishop Levada, and she like destroyed all of the files from the previous administration.
Yes, of course. When you get involved with an organization like Skull and Bones or like Scroll and Key or whatever, yes, you had to do these perverted things. However, it'll all be gravy after that. You'll be. Like let's say you want to become a journalist. We'll make sure you become the editor of the newspaper, of a prominent newspaper, or you'll become the CEO, whatever it is you want to do, or you'll become a big name director in Hollywood.
Well, I'd say Tom Holland he's one of the biggest names in Hollywood now. I saw his billboard everywhere when I was in Los Angeles recently. But he has he went to 2 Jesuit schools in England. Now he's like the new biggest A-lister in Hollywood.
Oh, okay, and of course,
You replaced Jesuit Georgetown educated Bradley Cooper as Hollywood's biggest A-lister.
well, okay, could I just mention one last thing? I was listening to Mae Brussell recently, and she was doing a broadcast from the 1970s, so the language is a little bit dated. And she was talking about media coverage of any sort of event, an assassination, a bombing, shooting, whatever. And you're an editor of a newspaper.
Oh, is your mic going out there a bit, George?
And
Oh, you're coming a bit in and out, George, with the audio. Just a heads up.
was you the day before?
Oh, okay. Just I got you there now. You're clear now.
Okay, so one day what your paper is going to carry the next day, and you get these stories from various sources, the Washington Post, the Associated Press, wherever, and your paper is only so big, and you can only carry so many words. So you have to make an executive decision, and you and your staff, you may have a few other people work with you, what stories you're going to carry. So you have 20 stories, and you decide you're going to carry 12. And then you had to make another decision as to how much of the actual story you're going to reprint in your paper. So let's say the story is originally 1,000 words. Well, you can't carry 12 stories that are 1,000 words because your paper would be bigger than the New York City phone book, and only people. Now, granted, this was in the 1970s, so you're talking the pre-internet era. So you might, with the lead story, you might carry half the original story, so 500 words. Second story, you carry a third of the story. Fourth story, you carry a fourth. So finally, when you got to a story, you might have like 5 or 10% of the original story. So you'll just give edited highlights. And this is not necessarily nefarious. Part of it is just being pragmatic. You cannot carry all the words of all the stories, but you had to make a decision how much of the stories you're going to include. So,
I was saying corporate advertising takes up a lot of space too.
Well, yes. So you may hear about an assassination or something like that, but you're not getting the whole story. You're giving what the newspapers are telling you. And as I said, it's not necessarily nefarious. They just simply don't have the time and space to carry everything.
No, it's a good point. Yeah, that's just like a reality of information in general. There's so much stuff going on everywhere. It's impossible to document everything.
Mm-hmm. And now, however, she was saying this back in the 1970s, that most of your daily newspapers, as well as TV stations and radio stations, usually will have somebody who's associated with the CIA, a CIA officer who oversees the newspaper or the radio station or whatever entity you're talking about.
Well, absolutely, I would agree. Absolutely. Well, that's and George, I'll probably have to go here at around the 2:30 mark. You got another minute.
Okay.
I'd say keep going to finish your point. Yeah, that's the CIA's. I think it's called Operation Mockingbird. That came out around Mae Brussels' time in the 60s and 70s. That was the CIA's plan to infiltrate the news media.
Oh, okay. And so anyhow, so your media, your newspapers, for people who still read them, such as myself, you're getting limited information. One, just for being practical reasons, and two, they're being overseen by the CIA. In other words, they're being overseen by the Catholic Church.
Oh, absolutely. And people want proof of this. Check out what E. Howard Hunt said on the documentary A Coup Made in America about the CIA's operation in Guatemala in 1954. He said Cardinal Spellman gave us the go-ahead on this. So the go-ahead for the mission, came from the Archbishop of New York to the CIA. Which, is proof that what you just said is true, that the bishops are, controlling it ultimately.
Okay, so anyhow, I guess we'll have to do a broadcast next week. And Happy New Year's.
Yeah, happy Jesuit Christopher Clavius New Year, as you'd say.
Well, yes, I believe this is our second broadcast. I forgot we did one. I did a brief one on Friday. So we'll keep in touch.
Yeah,
and I look forward to doing this soon.
Yeah, me too, George. And thanks everyone for tuning in. And I'll just shout out, thank you to everyone who donated for my trip to go to Oregon. I'm going to try to go sooner than later. If I think it'll probably be maybe even in a couple months. I'm going to go to the papers of the Brigadier General Herbert C. Holdridge, one of the rare few generals who had the courage to criticize the Vatican. But I'm going to go to his personal papers out in Oregon soon to scan in all of the documents, correspondences, and newsletters. And I appreciate everyone who donated to that cause. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace and love.